And welcome back in, everybody, to another edition here of the Auburn Undercover podcast here on the 24/7 Sports Network. My name is Nathan King, and we are back with Thursdays with Phillip, which we had obviously during the football season. Going to try to get rolling here as we go into the month of March and moving into the full off season once we get there as well. But so we're glad to have Phillip Marshall on the show here today. Our publisher Ronnie Sanders, I believe, will join us later on. Ronnie, can you hear us? Okay,
I can. Can you hear me?
we can hear you. Perfectly. Impeccable timing. Phillip, you and I were both there last night. It was great to see you at Neville Arena, and you certainly came by at a at a good night for the Tigers. Just talk about your impressions of a 30-point win for Auburn over an Ole Miss team. I mean, they're going to be in the tournament next month, and boy, Auburn just kind of looked like they were playing one of those mid-major teams from November and December.
They did. It was a tremendously impressive performance. And if Auburn could shoot like that every single game, then you could go ahead and mark them down as a national champion because nobody will beat them. But I thought that was the big thing. They shot, executed, whatever you want to call it, everything so well, except for a 5 or 6 minute stretch there in the first half when Ole Miss went from 22 down to 6 down. But then they came out in the second half, and it was like they just said, "That's enough of that," and it was really quite the performance.
Yeah, I mean, this is what Chris Beard said after the game that I mean, if Auburn plays that way, and it's funny, Phillip, in the first meeting against Ole Miss, Chris Beard said, "Well, that's the best Auburn has played all season."
Right.
I think they played even better than that in the second game against Ole Miss, and so. But I mean, when they get rolling like that at home, and you and I were talking about this before we got rolling, before we started, Phillip, like they had a couple games where it felt like, closer than they would have liked against Arkansas and Georgia, but at the same time, desperate teams that were dying for an NCAA tournament win. Both teams beat ranked teams in their next game, so clearly they were ready for a win like that. I think Auburn was looking forward to the opportunity of, all right, let's stop messing around. Let's play like our potential, shows we can play, and certainly that was one of the best games they played all year.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's interesting to me. It's like I think Janai Broome, who's been great all season, has turned it up a notch here the last few games, and he is truly he is a different kind of dude. He is he dominates everything, and he makes it so much easier for his teammates.
How does he compare to some of the other players you've watched over the years?
Well, we talked about that. I think if I was going to list the best players I can remember covering, I covered John Mengelt a little bit early in my career. He was a great shooter at the same era as Pete Maravich, and Mengelt scored 65 points in a game one time. But even then, I mean, of course, I was a kid during the Joel Eaves day, but the game was so different then. But really kind of starting in the 70s and 80s, mostly in the 80s, obviously Charles Barkley, Chuck Person, who, if there had been a three-point shot, the three-point shot came the year after he left. If there had been a three-point shot, he would have set scoring records that would never have been broken. Barkley, Person, Chris Morris, who was in that same era, was another lottery pick, and a great player, an inside-out player. Chris Porter, who who was the best player on the 1999 SEC championship team, and Doc Robinson, who was an All-American point guard on that same team. Wesley Person, Chuck's little brother, was an incredible shooter, like Chuck. But one a lot of people probably don't think about, or a couple of them are in the mid-'70s when Bob Davis was the head coach, Mike Mitchell and Eddie Johnson. Mike Mitchell played for a long time and was a great player. I remember the Sugar Bowl used to have a basketball tournament the same week as the Sugar Bowl football game. They may still have it, I don't know, but Auburn was in the basketball tournament, and Alabama was in the football game. So I was there at I was at the Sugar Bowl, but I'd covered Auburn. Well, Auburn was 0-2 in the Sugar Bowl tournament, but Mike Mitchell was the MVP. He was MVP, and they didn't win a game. He was a tremendous talent, but Charles Barkley was a fascinating player, and he led the league in rebounding all 3 years, and he was never really in shape the whole time he was at Auburn, and but he was one of the most remarkable athletes I've ever seen. I mean, I've literally watched him before practice stand flat-footed under the rim, and jump up and put his entire hand above the square. And this is a guy that really was 6'4". He wasn't really 6'6" as he was listed as. He was really about 6'4". So he was a model. Chuck Person was the epitome of an inside-outside player. But Janai Broome is right there, right there with any of them. He just has a way. I don't know. I mean, Sonny Smith, former Auburn coach, beloved Sonny Smith, told me that he thought that Janai Broome is the best, what he called rim level player he's ever seen, as opposed to somebody who plays above the rim. Is what he means by rim level player, and I wouldn't argue with that. He is really good, and is the it's unfortunate it happens this way. He deserves immense credit for what Auburn's done, but he doesn't get all the credit. I mean, that's a really good team, and he makes them better. Ronnie, we can't hear you.
How does this team compare to some of the ones that you've watched in the past or covered in the past?
That's another good question. I tend to, and I know this isn't the popular way to do it, but I tend to base how good a team is historically more on the regular season than on the postseason. Because the regular season is such a grind, and the postseason is so random. Who you draw, who you play, and maybe you can get to the Final Four sometimes without playing a ranked team because of upsets, and it's very random. But in modern time, well, the 1986 Auburn team that went to the Elite Eight, that's the postseason thing, but they were good. They had Chuck. It was a year after Barkley left, but they had Chuck Person, and they had Chris Morris, and they had Gerald White, Frank Ford. It was a great, but probably the best team other than this one was 1999. Chris Porter, Doc Robinson, all those guys. That was a great team. They went to the Sweet 16. I have a hard time saying the 2019 Auburn team was with those teams, because even though it ended up accomplishing the most, and that was a tremendous story and a tremendous run and all those things, they were not great during the regular season. They were 11-7, I think, in the SEC, and got just destroyed at Kentucky fairly late in the season. And but this team might be the best one of those I've just mentioned, because they've just got a real combination of things and depth and a remarkably connected team. I mean, that's I was talking to somebody the other day, and he said, "How many NBA players does Auburn have?" I said, "Well, maybe Janai Broom, maybe, and probably at some point Tahad Pettiford." I said, "Other than that, nobody." And there's lots of teams that got more NBA level talent than Auburn does, or some teams. I shouldn't say lots of teams, some teams. But this team, they're deep. Even Chad Baker-Mazzara might not play in the NBA, but he is a heck of a college basketball player. And the same thing is true of so many of those guys. Chaney Johnson has been remarkable recently. I mean, he just comes in and makes shots. But at this point, though, this team still got their story's not finished yet. They still not even in the regular season. I mean, if they were to lose to Kentucky and Texas A&M and Alabama, I wouldn't say they're the best team. So we still have to see.
Yeah, I mean, you and I were talking about it, Phillip. They got to go to Rupp, where not a lot of success historically. And as you mentioned, talking to Bruce yesterday, like even their best teams. And I think it goes to show that like basketball is a sport of totality. It's not necessarily one result to another. I mean, you mentioned that was the second to last game of February.
Right.
And that was their last loss before. I think they won 9 straight, 10 straight games, obviously, until the Final Four. And I think they lost by 30. I mean, they just got killed in that game. So even
they were behind by almost 40.
Yeah.
And then, garbage time, that was and that same team they had lost to Kentucky at home by 2 when they missed a point blank layup to send it to overtime.
Phil, we've talked about teams and coaches. I'm sorry, we talked about teams and players. How does Bruce Pearl compare?
Bruce Pearl is unique. He is definitely unique. He is obviously a really good coach. And it seems to me like here later in his career, he had become more willing to not be totally do everything himself. And Burgermeister plays a real role on offense. But he's obviously a really good coach. The record says so. But he is unique in the way he relates to fans, to players, to everybody. I mean, they were filling up Auburn Arena, before they were any good. I mean, people forget it. For 3 years, they weren't very good. For 2 years, they weren't very good at all. And then the third year, they were better, but still not even good enough to get in the NIT. And then the next year, they won the SEC championship, and off it went. But he just has a way with people. He has a way of relating to his players, to the fans, and he is one of, if not the most popular coach in any sport that I've seen at Auburn. I believe that, and I don't, so this team wouldn't be great without Janai Broom. It wouldn't be the same without Janai Broom. But Auburn's done a lot of winning with Bruce Pearl before Janai Broom got here. So they would be different. They wouldn't be the same, and they probably wouldn't be 26-2, but they would still be good because they would have a different center and they'd be playing a different way. But I think he's a remarkable coach. I really think he is, and he's a showman for sure, and a salesman, because he has certainly sold Auburn people on what he's doing.
Phillip, talking about the end of this season, you mentioned the last 3 games being so important, and that's what Bruce Pearl said yesterday. Was his message to his team was like, hey, he said Dylan Cardwell called him on Sunday and said, how can I help us practice and get ready for this? Because like they had to win that one. They didn't have to, but knowing the level of competition. But when you look at this last stretch for them, Phillip, I mean, it seems like maybe this is the first time ever at Auburn where there are so many things you could pay attention to as it relates to the end of the season. Auburn is going for the #1 overall seed. They're going for an SEC championship. Janai Broome is vying for National Player of the Year. Bruce Pearl might be National Coach of the Year. I mean, it's just there's so much interest right now with this team that there's several different storylines you could follow into the month of March.
No question. I mean, it's kind of a role reversal at Kentucky. Kentucky's not really playing for anything big because they might move up a line in the seeds or something, but Auburn's playing with all those things you're talking about, and it's all Kentucky that is in the mode of we get to play the #1 team in the nation on our floor, and so that's going to be a big deal, and it's going to be it'll be really loud, and though I have honestly never found Rupp Arena, even though it's got 24,000 people there, to be a particularly intimidating venue, and that's probably because the fans it's so big for one thing, and two the fans are not right there on top of you, but it's obviously loud when they get roaring, and Auburn they won there in 1983 when Odell Mosteller, who was a guard, who would have been another one that would have scored a lot more points if there'd been a 3-point line, got hot, and they won there in '88 when John Kaler hit a 3-pointer inside the last 10 seconds. And the one in '80, I don't remember very well the circumstances of the '83 game. The '88 game was a huge surprise. Auburn was, though Auburn had a good team, went to the NCAA tournament, but they weren't supposed to have a chance at Kentucky. I remember that. And it was the thing is, when you get old, you get confused. The amazing thing is that except for those two games, Auburn has never won at Kentucky, at Memorial Coliseum or at Rupp Arena. And you would think it would, and there've been some close games now. You would think just a couple times accidentally they would have won one of those games, but they haven't. So, of course, that really has those kind of historic things are interesting, but it really has nothing to do with this team. And this team is 7-0 on the road, which is another amazing thing they've done. It's on the road in the SEC. They're 7-0, so that's going to be a very interesting game. I think Kentucky will have a hard time containing Auburn's offense. They're not really real good on defense, and Auburn's got to try to keep them from getting hot from three. As I said, very similar to Alabama, though Alabama probably is clearly better than they are. They swept them, but it's still a very similar circumstance.
Phillip, switching gears a little bit to football. Let's talk a little bit about Hugh Freeze. How pivotal is this year? Is this the year he's going to turn it around? And what if he doesn't?
What if he doesn't? It's hard to talk in specifics about if this happens, this will happen. The one thing I am convinced of is that John Cohen has every intention of giving Hugh Freeze the time he promised him to build this program. I don't think there's any question about that. Now, could it get so bad that commitment could be shaken? Maybe so. It'd be, but I think it would have to be really bad. And I would say, I read these national guys sometimes, and they have their clickbait hot seat rankings as if they really know. And Hughes always on there. I don't think going into this season he was on that hot seat. Now, like I said, things could. What if he won 2 games? Well, that's a whole different deal. But as long as this coming up team progresses and plays well and has a decent year, and anybody can define decent however they want to. But the best way I could put it is I just don't think there is any thought right now that, okay, we got to keep an eye on this situation. We might have to make a change when the year's over. I don't believe that's there. Nothing is impossible. I mean, but that's what I believe right now.
I think it's like you look at last year and it made some sense that like Billy Napier at Florida was kind of looked at as shaky because I don't think their team was set up to be like, this looks like Auburn's best team on paper. It would be different if they had a rough roster, but I think you're exactly right, Phillip. I think maybe if they were depleted, people would say, "Ooh, things don't look good." But like this team is expected to be better now. Like you said, if it goes the other way, we'll be having a different conversation. I think people expect this to be. I mean, it should be. It should be on paper his best team so far.
Yeah, I talked to I mentioned this to somebody last night. I talked to a member of the Auburn support staff, and at the game last night, and I said, "How do you feel about it?" He said, "We definitely have the pieces, but it's a matter of fitting them together, and that's a lot more difficult than people realize." And I think that's the case. I think there's no question they got enough talent to win games at a fairly high level. But then, of course, it's all going to start with a quarterback. That's the guy he wanted, the guy and so we'll see about that. But that's where it always starts these days. I mean, it starts with a quarterback. I think they have a chance to be really, really good on defense. I'll be surprised if they're not. And they should be better. You guys have written about it just about everywhere. Offensive line, those receivers have got more experience now. I've never thought the running back was a big issue. I think the running backs they have are talented, and they might not be one with this. It has the same kind of special characteristics that Hunter had, but still, I think that definitely SEC high level running back. So I think it's going to be interesting to see. But back to the original question, at this point, I don't think anybody in position to make any decisions or even influence any decisions views this as, okay, you better win this year. And what I know is not the case is there is no, okay, you have to win X number of games. I think that's rarely really the way things are viewed by administrators, and I'm pretty certain John Cohen doesn't view it that way. He probably views it, hey, you need to show substantial progress. But even then, I don't know. Like I said, I don't think anybody is viewing him as on the hot seat or going into the season. I don't think it's viewed that way at all.
How would a 6-6 finish look?
See, now you want me to speculate. I think it would depend on. I think the fans would be real unhappy. I'll just put it that way. But I don't believe that John Cohen is going to be particularly susceptible to pressure from the masses. I really don't. And I would guess if it was 6-6, and they should be better than 6-6. But if it was 6-6, that it would depend on how that 6-6 happened. The way some of those games happened last year was, you have to believe that if there's football gods that some of that's going to go back the other way this year because last year they lost some games in strange ways.
There's no question about that. What do you think about 4 new quarterbacks on the roster?
I think that I think their eggs are going to be in Jackson Arnold's basket. I believe that. I think the guy from Stanford, if he was going to be here in the spring, I might think he had a shot at making it interesting. But I don't, and I don't believe that. I don't believe that you're going to see Deuce. I mean, I'm sure they'll talk about it during the spring and all that stuff, and he's an extremely talented guy. But he probably needs a year to develop, and whether that means he doesn't play or plays just a mop-up role or plays a role of just a specialty guy for certain situations. I don't know. It's to me that's a tough call when you're a coach right now because guys can just say if they're not happy, they can just say sayonara and be gone. And the ones big time players that aren't playing or big time talents that aren't playing are often besieged by if you want to call it tampering. I mean, it's just part of the deal now, but they're often besieged by calls from other schools. So, and people trying to talk them into convince them that they're being mistreated, and if they were at their school, they'd be playing all the time, and blah blah blah. So, you just never know these days. But I do think that Jackson Arnold is the guy they're counting on, and he was a top 10 recruit out of high school, and really had a remarkably difficult situation last year with literally all his receivers getting hurt, and finished the season pretty strong after he got benched and then came back, and he's talented enough, that's for sure, and everybody tells me he's a really good young man, and so that'll be interesting because I think that's where it starts.
Phillip, let's talk a little softball.
Softball, well,
Chris and Kate Malveaux.
Yeah, they're 14-1. But when you look at it, you say, boy, that's great, which it is. But then you look at the SEC standings, and like everybody's 14-1 except for the ones that are undefeated, and except for a couple. Strangely, Alabama's got 6 losses, I think it is. But Chris and Kate have, at the end of Mickey Dean's tenure, and I think Mickey Dean's a really good coach, and he's definitely a really good man. But he was having health issues. He wasn't even there during fall practice, not this past fall, obviously, but the previous one, because of his health issues, and the atmosphere around the team just didn't seem right. It just didn't seem right. And now Chris and Kate are coming there, and they're young and vibrant, and these players have 100% bought in to them. There's a different kind of energy around Auburn softball that I've seen in a while. And I don't know, they got one pitcher that's pitched in just about every single game. S.J. Guerin, who is they've won 14 games. She's won 9 of them and had saves in 2 of them. So she's transferred from Oklahoma. She doesn't throw all that hard, but whatever it is she throws, they have a hard time hitting it. And other than that, they got the there's been some at catcher. There's been some some mixing and matching, but the rest of the position players, every single one of them is a senior, the starters. And that makes a difference, kind of like this basketball team. When you get old, these days it helps. And so if they can have enough pitching, I think they'll be I don't know, saying a contender in this league would be hard, because I mean Texas, Oklahoma, and Texas A&M are all like in the top 5, and Auburn starts the season against Mississippi State on the road, and then they play at Texas, and then Florida at home, and Texas and Florida and Oklahoma, depending on which poll you see, are all ranked number 1 in one of them. So it's going to be quite a challenge. But I really think that these players have really bought into what they're selling, and they've been amazing in how resilient they've been. I mean, they've come from behind to win 8 of those 14 games, and but to answer your original question about the Malvoes, they have done a really, really good job, and I think they're very real in it, and connecting with those players and trying to be part of their lives in addition to softball, and as best I can tell, talking to players and some of their parents, they've all bought in. So they start SEC play in a week from Friday, so we'll see.
How do you sort of gauge? I think expectations are everything when it comes to college sports. But you mentioned like the league is so good. I mean, softball might be the ultimate, explanation for how, the 16-team SEC and just how incredible. I mean, you add Texas and Oklahoma, it's just unbelievable. What would you say are the, maybe not even year 1, but year 2, year 3, sort of early in their tenure? What would you say the expectation should be for this program?
I'm not sure I would. And tell, because they got some good players out of the transfer portal, but they weren't here to really go hard into the transfer portal in time. I think middle of the pack this year, and then next year it's going, because they'll have a whole new team just about after this season, and it's hard to say. But
so what is the team?
Middle of the pack, you got to be really good to finish in the middle of the pack, honestly, and they may have 16 teams. They usually get everybody in the NCAA tournament, so they may get all 16 teams in this time. I don't know.
Phil, what's the team makeup considering the coaching change? How many transfers? How many high school signees? What is the current?
Well, all those seniors I was just talking about are all returnees now. A couple of them were transfers. 4 came here as transfers, but all those seniors with the pitchers, and and it's like baseball pitching. If you got to have it, if you can't pitch, you can't win. And S.J. Guerin, that I was just talking about, is a transfer from Oklahoma. Haley Rainey's is transfer from Cal State Fullerton, and she was the Big West pitcher of the year last season. And Shaylee Clemens is the third pitcher who is a sophomore and who came here as a two-way player to hit and pitch. And last year she didn't pitch at all. She just pinch hit mostly, as she did last year. But now she is only pitching. She's done well, and but the thing about it is those 3 pitchers, none of them are going to go out and be like Matty Pinta and just say, "Okay, I'm tired of this," and just start throwing it by people. And their other pitchers are man, with ice Isis Tresby, who is their leading hitter, our second leading hitter, is one of the other pitchers, and Emma Rolfe, who's been around a long time but has never really broken through, and Tambora, who none of those pitchers, those other three pitchers have been overly effective so far this season. And they have a freshman, but I don't think she's ready to. That's what I was told before the season, that she's still kind of learning about college softball. So I think those three pitchers I mentioned are the ones, and we'll see, because you got to have that. And but SJ has pitched in, like I said, almost every game, and that's a little difficult to do in a 3-game SEC series. It's once they've seen you once, they'll start to figure you out probably.
Well, Phillip, we enjoyed getting back to it today. Enjoyed the conversation, and we'll see what happens this weekend. I mean, feasibly, Auburn could lose in Lexington, and we could turn around, and 2.5 hours later could be giving them an SEC championship if Alabama loses in Knoxville. So it'll be an interesting weekend for sure.
Yes, I think Alabama and Knoxville is going to be a challenge for them.
Yep.
And I think, despite Florida losing to Georgia, I think even at home, that's going to be a challenge for Alabama. And if Alabama goes 3-0 from here on out, I'll tip my hat to them. But if Auburn were to beat Kentucky and Alabama lose to Tennessee, then it would be all the way over. Auburn would be the SEC champion alone.
Yep. It'll be they control, like you said, they control their destiny. They're obviously wanting to win it outright. And what I've been telling people about these last 3 games, I mean, it is tough, but in order for Auburn to not win a championship, they would have to lose more games in the next 9 days than they have lost all season. So
right, and they would have to lose 2 more games than Alabama does.
Yeah.
But the way the schedule is set up, I mean, these 2 road games, it's
tough.
And then Alabama, Auburn beat them in Tuscaloosa, but Alabama is good enough. You better play well against Alabama, or you'll get beat at home. So it's going to be interesting. It's kind of fun to watch, and because it's quite a story, and it sure does liven up the coming spring.
Yeah, it's been incredible to follow so far, and for those who have some hiked up blood pressure, just get ready for it, because they are going to play every game from here on out is an NCAA tournament team.
Right,
you're going to play an NCAA tournament team, so all the easy breezy ones are behind you, and get ready for the month of March. So should be a great time. Well, Phillip, thanks so much, and enjoyed the conversation.
I did as well.
All righty, we will talk to y'all soon.
See y'all next week.